Well, the first approach is by the deadline of the 31st of August, get as many both Australians and contractors out of Kabul. And we know that that is the desperate, urgent thing at the moment. The second thing is those nearly 5,000 Afghanis who've been here, we now know they cannot go back. Instead of being on temporary protection visas, give them certainty. Don't re-traumatise them with all of this and let them stay. The third thing that we're calling for, and this is right across the churches, churches that might be on the left, churches on the right, churches in the centre, all saying the same thing. We have to increase our humanitarian cap. There's 1.4 million Afghani refugees in Pakistan, more going into Iran, into Turkey. And it's our moral duty to actually say we can resettle many of these. Countries like Uganda that have 1 million refugees are themselves taking 3,000 Afghani refugees. We can certainly do better, and that's a call right across the church spectrum.
Why do you think Scott Morrison seems so immovable in this moment?
Well, it was Scott Morrison as Immigration Minister in 2014 that introduced the temporary protection visas, and we know that it does play in politics. We're keeping you safe. I'm really hoping this time now Prime Minister Morrison will say, look, these Afghanis that have been here, they have been working, they are terrific. Keeping them on TPVs mean they can't even bring out their family members who are at risk. When it comes to this figure, it's always clouded by, well, maybe there are terrorists, as if we can't do the proper security checking, and as if terrorists are going to be just fleeing in these sorts of circumstances. The truth is that Australia has been at war there for 20 years. We have Australians in NGOs who are choosing to stay, to work with the communities, women and children. Enormous courage. I just take my hat off to them. And the least our government can do is to say, well, we actually have a humanitarian cap dropped by Scott Morrison just last year by 5,000. So it was 18,500. It's down to 13,750. And if you're just displacing people who are already waiting to come to Australia by saying it's just within the humanitarian cap, that's not morally serious work. And that's why I think many Australians are rising up and saying we have to do better.
Tim, you know, of course, worked in this space for so many years. Give us a sense of the humanitarian crisis looming. You know, even once this deadline of August 31st has passed, once the Allies have completely left Afghanistan.
Well, we all know what the Taliban are like, and though they have become very good at using Twitter and Instagram, their commitments, their fundamental values have not changed. We all hope that they might allow girls to go to school, and there's been some positive noises, but most people do not believe the leopard will change its spots. For girls, that is quite terrifying. For a generation now, 20 years, young people have had dreams, have said, I can go to university, I can pursue the sorts of freedoms we just take for granted here. Those are very, very unlikely under the Taliban, given their vision, given their fundamental commitments. So it's a very depressing future, and that's why so many already have fled.
You know, the Prime Minister is a very public Christian in his faith. He's also a Liberal. You've argued that previous Liberal administrations showed far greater compassion.
Absolutely. Starting with Bob Menzies in 1959, he said, we have taken the most refugees of any country on a per capita basis. Then it was over 200,000. Malcolm Fraser, of course, 50,000 Vietnamese. John Howard, 4,000 Kosovos that we airlifted in, and it was a much smaller crisis than this. And then Tony Abbott. Yes, he had to be dragged kicking and screaming. It was the last act of his prime ministership, but he took 16,000 Syrian refugees, additional to the humanitarian cap. We are saying this is the Menzies tradition. And look, when it comes to faith, that's why I think the churches are so important. We all know that God's heart is particularly for the plight for the refugee. The biblical language is to call them the stranger in your midst. God's heart is particularly for them. And many people might say Christians arguing for Muslims. Absolutely. These people carry the image of God in our faith. When you approach another human, you're approaching something of God. And that's how seriously we take this. That's why this call is so widespread, from Anglican and Catholic archbishops to Pentecostals, churches like Hillsong, who also are saying, absolutely, we have to increase this cap.
Tim Costello, thank you so much for joining us.
That's a pleasure.